morning. It is Friday, October 23rd, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, a rush of diplomatic activity as the recent violence in Israel and the West Bank reaches the international stage. Hillary Clinton survives an 11-hour House committee grilling on the 2012 attack on the U.S. Embassy in Libya. And later on the show, meditation and yoga supposedly dramatically cut our need for healthcare services. We'll take a closer look. Good morning, I am Yael Levi, and we start in Israel. The wave of violence that has plagued the country and the West Bank for a month has moved into the arena of international politics with a flurry of diplomatic activity. Yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry expressed cautious optimism following a 4-hour meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Berlin. But he refrained from blaming any side in particular, stressing that it was up to both the Israeli and Palestinian leadership to ease the tensions. The U.S. Secretary of State is set to travel to the region on Saturday for meetings with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and Jordan's King Abdullah in Amman. Both the Arab leaders have, according to media reports, rejected an offer by Kerry to convene a summit with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Jordan, which has offered to retake responsibility for Temple Mount, the focus of most of the recent tension, threatened yesterday to take diplomatic actions unless the status quo at the holy site is restored. On the ground, the violence sadly continues. Yesterday, one Palestinian was killed, another was critically wounded after carrying out a stabbing attack in the central city of Beit Shemesh in Israel. 3 more Palestinians were wounded during a riot on the Israeli-Gaza border in southern Israel. Now, since October 1st, at least 49 Palestinians and 1 Israeli Arab have been killed, including alleged attackers. 8 Israelis have been killed in attacks. Now, before we break everything down, let's take a look at the following report about the violence that ensued in the region yesterday and discuss.
Another day of violence in Israel and in the West Bank, while diplomatic efforts to end the crisis continue. In the early morning, an 18-year-old student was moderately wounded by a Palestinian near a synagogue in the city of Beit Shemesh, southwest of Jerusalem. The assailants in Beit Shemesh were wearing T-shirts with Hamas slogans, perhaps another indication that extremist jihadist groups in the West Bank and Gaza are getting involved in the ongoing violence. Some hours later in the afternoon, a Palestinian terrorist attempted unsuccessfully to stab an Israeli soldier near the West Bank city of Hebron. Meanwhile, the behind-the-scenes attempts to resolve the crisis continue. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini called for a Middle East Quartet meeting Friday.
I will be there together with Kerry, Lavrov and the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General to coordinate messages, to pass a strong message to the parties to calm down the situation on the ground.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Berlin Thursday.
There's no question that this wave of attack is driven directly by incitement. Incitement from Hamas, incitement from the Islamist movement in Israel, and incitement, I'm sorry to say, from President Abbas, the Palestinian Authority.
Kerry said the meeting gave him a cautious measure of optimism that the tension in the region could be diffused.
But if parties want to try, and I believe they do, want to move to a de-escalation, I think there are a set of choices that are available.
Thursday's attack in Beit Shemesh raised fears of much greater involvement by terror organizations in the current escalation. However, according to Adnan Wright, the head of the Fatah-affiliated Tanzim militant organization, the assailants are not waiting for instructions from anyone when they strike. And as the efforts to end the crisis continue to come from the top, on the ground, the streets are still burning.
This just in this morning, another stabbing attack in the Gush Etzion region of the West Bank. According to initial reports, a Palestinian assailant supposedly stabbed an Israeli man at a checkpoint, causing moderate injuries. The assailant was shot by security forces on the scene, or as they like to term it these days, neutralized. We'll have more about that as the day proceeds. Before we go to Jerusalem, joining us, before we go to Jerusalem, I am joined in studio by Paula Sleer, Russia Today's Middle East Bureau Chief. Good morning to you. Also with us in studio, Ron Friedman, I-24 News Morning Edition editor. Good morning to you as well. Before we take a look at everything that's breaking down, I think the most important thing is that essentially, Paula, I'm going to start with you. essentially, Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday does this, flurry of meetings, both with Kerry and Mogherini. When it comes to the Kerry meeting, to me what was very, very interesting is that it seemed to be two differing, almost like a press-off, that Kerry sits there, has his agenda, and Netanyahu says the same thing. What are we looking at the role of the Americans? How does the role of the Americans look to you at this point when it comes to this recent wave of violence in Israel?
I think most people would agree with your assessment. It really is two leaders meeting. Nothing is expected to come out of the meeting, and nothing comes out of the meeting. You have Kerry making statements like there needs to be a reduction in bloodshed. I mean, that's nothing riveting for any kind of international leader to say. I think more and more people are frustrated with the role of the United States. You're asking specifically vis-a-vis the situation now. But I think it's a growing sense. I think particularly for Palestinians, there has always been this perception that the United States is not a neutral mediator, that the United States has betrayed its allies. If you look at its activities over the past few years vis-a-vis the Arab Spring, I think for the Israelis, there's also a growing frustration. People still here see the United States as their closest ally, but there's also frustration in terms of the United States never really does anything, and it is slowly taking itself out of the region. I know. The United States never really does anything is something that can be, I think, argued for and against. The Americans will say we've tried for many, many, many years, but the two sides. But I think that's the bottom line. I think you have to have Israelis and Palestinians. The initiative has to come from them. You have to have the leaders themselves really wanting to sit at the negotiating table and do something. And critics of Netanyahu charge that he is not in any position to do that. He's not putting any kind of concessions on the table. And the same accusations are made of the Palestinians. So if it doesn't come from them, there's nothing actually that the United States or anybody in the international community can do. It's that third party of a vacuum that I think we're looking at when it comes to a very explosive situation these days, because this wave of the latest wave of violence is essentially coming and is focusing on Jerusalem, one of the holy sites for all three religions, and Lord knows always was the fear that that's where the next wave of violence will be sparked out of. That's what's happening. Let's go first straight live to Jerusalem, where Danny Swibel, I-24 News correspondent, is standing by. Danny, good morning to you. It is Friday. It's the day of prayers for the Muslim community. What have you seen on the way in? What are we expecting in Jerusalem?
Good morning, Yael. As you could imagine, the security has definitely stepped up at every bus stop, train stop, entrance and exit of every town, as well as here at the Damascus Gate. There is definitely stepped up security. Nothing like the security we've seen in previous weeks at some of the peak of the attacks that had been occurring from Palestinian attackers. But yes, definitely heightened security because it is Friday after all, and with Muslims going to prayer in mass, things tend to intensify rather quickly. So again, border police are here in mass. People are just starting to wake up, and the town is just starting to go about its day. Now the West Bank, there was actually a recent stabbing against an Israeli border patrolman. The Palestinian attacker was stabbed. This is part of the ongoing wave that's occurred in the last 2-3 weeks. So right now, yes, the security forces here are stepped up and ready.
Danny Swibel joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you for that. And also, as we mentioned this morning, the Palestinians have announced and called today, Friday, a day of rage. That's coming also from the Palestinian administration and from Hamas. And that's something to expect today, sadly, every single Friday. Joining us on the phone also, Amir Thibault, Walla's diplomatic correspondent. Amir, good morning to you. And as we were touching on this morning, Netanyahu meets Kerry yesterday. Other than the press op that we saw with the statements, anything coming out of that meeting that we know of?
Not yet, and maybe it's too early to tell. But from what I've heard yesterday, basically Kerry came to Netanyahu with a couple of ideas that had to do with somehow taking down the tensions on Temple Mount. And of course, Netanyahu doesn't like initiatives that have been suggested recently by France, for example, to put international peacekeepers of some sort on the Temple Mount. He doesn't like ideas that have been raised by the Jordanians. Right. And so Kerry came to him and said, well, Bibi, he always calls him by his nickname. He said, Bibi, so what do you want? What's going to happen? What should we do? And there are no clear answers to that question yet. Netanyahu knows what he doesn't want on Temple Mount. He doesn't want any change of the status quo. He doesn't want anything that would look like an Israeli concession in face of the Palestinian terrorism.
He can't afford that, I'm assuming, as well. You know, that's something he definitely cannot afford when it comes to his political internal constituency. But when it comes to, you know, this cautious optimism that John Kerry was speaking of, we have no information on where that optimism is coming from, do we?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I've learned from my past covering John Kerry's peace initiatives that when John Kerry says there is reason for optimism and we're making progress and we're getting closer, it doesn't always mean that we actually should be more optimistic than before the meeting. We remember when he was running the negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians, and also during the war in Gaza last summer, that every time he would have a press conference with the Israeli or Palestinian leader and say, we're getting closer, we're making progress, usually it actually meant the other way.
And when we're looking...
So, I don't know, I'm very hopeful, I have to tell you, that John Kerry will succeed in his initiative to somehow take down the tensions. I do remember that then when we had the last round of violence in Jerusalem in November of 2014, he actually managed to get Netanyahu and the King of Jordan to somehow do a statement together. And he's supposed to meet the king. He's supposed to meet the king on Saturday. Maybe that's the meeting that will actually make the breakthrough.
Oh, yeah, although both, I think, King Abdullah and Mahmoud Abbas have already stated that they do not want a summit with Benjamin Netanyahu. When it comes to the Security Council meeting yesterday, Amir Tibon, as well as, on the agenda that happened yesterday, anything to be gleaned out of that meeting?
No, it was mostly really just a feud between the Israeli ambassador and the Palestinian foreign minister. Nothing constructive that came out of it because, again, there is no real idea that both sides can accept that's currently on the table. There are ideas that neither side can accept. There are ideas that one can accept and the other can't. But we haven't yet seen a formula to which both Netanyahu and Abu Mazen will say, okay, we can sign on this, we can say this publicly, and we can put this really terrible wave of violence behind us. That's, by the way, we're all optimistic that some kind of statement or summit will actually help. We should also take into consideration the opportunity that the cat's out of the bag and it will be impossible to put it back in.
Jeez. No, very, very, very true. Amir Tibon joining us this morning on the phone. Thank you very much for that one. Paul, I'm asking you because it seems like there's this huge vacuum of a third party, of a third international party to step in. As Amir Tibon rightfully said, these statements, we've heard them over the course of the last 20-some years. Is that a vacuum that you think possibly the Russians can fill in, or some other international, I think that's the only other player in town? And do they even have the time to do that?
I think they have the time. I think they have the interest, more importantly. I think for the Russians, this is the perfect opportunity to get involved more and more as a mediator in the Israeli-Palestinian issue. It's not just the Israeli-Palestinian issue for the Russians. I mean, what we see happening in Syria, criticize it or not criticize it, it's certainly clear that Moscow wants to and is playing a greater role in Syria. Russia has now come to the forefront and filled the role that the United States used to have in Egypt. So Putin has said this, the Russian president, repeatedly in the past, that he wants to get more involved in the dialogue between the Israelis and Palestinians. Sometimes the Israelis actually haven't liked that. They haven't liked the Russians pushing the peace process agenda always on the table. They would prefer to have Israeli-Russian relations as separate to the actual Russia playing that central role.
I think there was one thing we can agree on, that any international party is going to always push the peace process, well, or lack thereof, onto the table, something that doesn't,
I do think the Russians, though, are in a better position at the moment than the United States. I think they have a lot of credibility with the Arab world and with the Palestinians that the Americans don't. I think their relationship with Israel is perhaps a little less rosy. It's not that all Israelis support Putin. I think people have respect for him as a strong leader, but I think there's a lot of criticism for what he's doing in Syria. But in terms of the credibility that Moscow has vis-a-vis Palestinians, vis-a-vis the Arab world,
that's such a much bigger issue than that, because if that were to go that way, then we're stepping into, I shouldn't be saying we, then Israel is stepping into what seems to be the ensuing, in very small doses, but very much so, new Cold War between the U.S. and Russia.
So maybe it goes back to what I said earlier. Maybe it actually needs to come from grassroots. Maybe and it's so easy to say that. I know. Because people would argue that Russia is a better mediator than the United States. But if it puts us in the position of Cold War, it takes us right back to let's stop looking for an international mediator and let the two sides actually come together. And possibly the two sides will do it themselves, which is something I think the Americans have hoped for the past the past decade at least, which is the time to turn to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Rebecca Shimoni-Stoyle of Times of Israel. Good morning to you, Rebecca. I'm asking you because Kerry, in Europe, on his way to the Middle East, first Amman with Mahmoud Abbas and King Abdullah, is it even perceived as his attempt to calm things down? Because it seems like what we saw yesterday was a diplomatic effort of statements from the Secretary of State.
Well, certainly, I think that what's going on here is twofold. Yes, I think that on the part of Kerry, at least, there's a genuine hope that maybe he can come up with the magic words or the magic solution to calm things down. Right. If not, and actually today he gave an indication that perhaps he really does still hope to move toward a more comprehensive sort of solution or conversation at least. But on the other hand, there certainly is this other side, perhaps the more cynical side, that would say that in order to remain relevant, and I heard you were just discussing how relevant the U.S. is in the region still, in order to remain relevant, Kerry has to seem like he's doing something. So to not go and to not speak to the parties, even if there is little hope of bridging a gap, would have just chipped away even further at U.S. relevance in the region. And I think that that is a concern.
No, very, very true. But I think, Rebecca, I think you're raising a fascinating point, because I think that people of the region, though, already know that it's, it's a flurry of press ops, so to speak. That even the people sitting here, and in that respect, and I'm asking you, is it a disengagement of the United States from what is deemed the Israeli-Palestinian mess, or they have bigger fish to fry? Because at the end of the day, this is not the only stop of the Secretary of State. He's heading over also to Saudi, right?
Well, it goes both ways. Not only is this not the only stop of the Secretary of State, but the U.S. already isn't the only address for dealing with this mess. I mean, today, again, we saw the quartet trying to weigh in again and say, we're still relevant, we're still a possible interlocutor. And, it seems that there's just a group of parties lining up. The trip to Saudi Arabia also, you could see it in terms of regional stability. You could also see it in terms of trying to find another alternate interlocutor. I think that to some extent what you see is the U.S. willingness to find other intermediaries to work alongside the U.S. And perhaps, again, this does indicate that there is a certain slipping of America's own ability to serve as an interlocutor, whether it's because it doesn't have credibility in the area,
or it doesn't want to,
or it doesn't want to.
No,
it doesn't have an idea.
It doesn't have an idea, and it seems also, it's hard when it was interesting to hear Kerry actually very much next to Benjamin Netanyahu try to distance himself from taking a side, which is very, not part of the course of what the Americans used to be doing in those press ups. I have to ask you this, because over the past 24 hours also there's been a storm of controversy, and I know the world has been dealing with, but over the statements of Benjamin Netanyahu, where vis-a-vis, the Mufti of Jerusalem, the Palestinians, and the Holocaust, the State Department actually, yesterday also came out stating that, was that odd to you to listen to, Rebecca, when the State Department found it necessary to come out with a statement saying that it was the Germans who perpetrated the Holocaust? How much did that detract from all the mess that's going on right now in the Middle East?
Well, the White House statement was very interesting today, because they basically said not only it was the Germans that perpetrated it, but please, Mr. Netanyahu, could you stop, it stopped short of saying inciting, could you stop saying things that might make people more upset? And it seemed that kind of statement, on one hand, is it discordant with what it seemed that Kerry was trying to do in meeting with Netanyahu? Perhaps not. This is a common thing that we see in this administration, and it leaves those of us who observe the administration constantly wondering, is this a coordinated attempt to approach Netanyahu, approach the Israelis, but still maintain what appears to be a critical distance? Or is this just literally a case of a right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing? And sometimes you begin to wonder. I do think in this case, however, there has been, and this administration has certainly shown, that it has a desire to balance out what seems like steps toward Israelis with steps that gesture toward a certain even-handedness. So perhaps it's no coincidence that that very comment came today as Congress was holding as a committee in Congress was holding a meeting specifically to discuss Palestinian incitement and the Palestinian role in this whole situation, and to what degree statements by Palestinian leadership were responsible for the current upswing in violence. And so it does seem that there's a certain balancing act going in Washington. And again, I would stress that this is an effort to maintain a certain amount of credibility.
Rebecca Shimoni-Stroil, thank you very much for joining us from Washington, D.C. this morning as we move along. Time of the day, of the week, to move to Ron Friedman, who joins us with the news you've missed while scanning the headlines, in place for Ami Kaufman, who is on assignment in Oregon.
Yes, big shoes to fill.
Yes.
We're wishing Ami a great time in the States.
Oregon. Yes, definitely.
Wouldn't mind trading with him.
Yes.
So the first story I'm bringing you today actually has to do with what we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes and the recent violence here in Israel. It's a claim that's been voiced definitely by Israeli critics, but also here in Israel, and that is that is or isn't Israel using excessive force in tackling these threats, these stabbing attacks, and sometimes shooting attacks used by Palestinians. One group, an international organization called Defense for Children International, is saying yes, definitely they're using excessive force, and they might be breaking international law as well. We have a report on that.
Let's take a look.
Disproportionate force. This is the claim put forward by rights groups against Israeli forces during the recent spike in violence across Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. A report by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that from October 6th till the 12th, at least 201 Palestinian children were injured by Israeli soldiers or settlers. Speaking to I24 News, an Israeli army spokesperson said the report failed to mention that half of those children carried out attacks against Israelis. Israel has seen a wave of stabbing attacks against both civilian and military personnel by Palestinian youth, leaving 8 Israelis killed. Many of the attackers were shot dead on scene. But the report points out that a number of those 200 children, including 13-year-old Abdul Rahman Abdullah, were fatally shot or injured during demonstrations. In Abdul's case, Israel said the killing was, quote, unintentional, and that soldiers were aiming for a nearby adult.
My son was going to school like all the other kids. He finished school that day, but he never came back home. They shot him. Even though there are no clashes inside the refugee camp. There are no ambulances around to take him. This is the proof that the Israelis assassinated him. They killed him.
The High Commissioner for Human Rights says that the number of casualties, in particular those resulting from the use of live ammunition by Israeli forces, raises concerns of excessive use of force and violations of the right to life and security.
What we are doing is just our duty. We're on our land and they are shooting at us, and they are not leaving us alone.
Israeli forces deny using live fire, but the discrepancy may arise from the use of the Ruger American rifle, which this year was given approval to be used against Palestinian rock throwers. Rights groups say despite the Ruger's less lethal character, it can still be deadly or cause serious bodily harm, especially to minors. Also included in the report, Israeli settler attacks against Palestinians in the West Bank. Ramallah-based Al-Haq human rights organization says it documented 48 cases of settler violence since October 1st, including attacks against children. Bouts of violence can leave psychological scars on the youth, including depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress.
The reason for which they are sad is the occupation, is the search, is the limit to their freedom of movement. So it's not as the other people in the world. They are very different life.
Whether it's 13-year-old stabbers or their 13-year-old victims, children on both sides are yet again the casualties of this recent wave of violence between Israelis and Palestinians.
Gabi Weininger's report for I24 News Morning Edition. The sad thing about this, really, to me is, and I know we've all been covering this now for several weeks, is that, excessive force, yes or not, something we can debate forever, something that Israel will definitely always say is not the case. It's the children. Right. It's the children that constantly are the victims of this and are, whose future is destroyed on both sides. Yes.
All right, the next item we have is fresh in overnight. ISIS, the Islamic State organization, for the first time published a video, one of their infamous clips, but this time in Hebrew. Yes. So what we can see, here's the clip. It's a man, we can't see his face, we don't know his identity, but he's speaking in
true good ISIS production form. Yeah.
Right, as usual. Yeah. Speaking in fluent Hebrew and hurling outrageous threats at Israel. This person is talking about how you think things are bad now when it's just stabbing attacks. What are you going to do when thousands of Daesh loyalists will be attacking your cities?
And I think it's awful. But Paul Eslier sitting with us in studio. I'm thinking of this also as capital in the hands of politicians now. How terrifying is that also? This, not that it's wrong, yes, this is frightening, but this now is also in the hands of politicians of the regions, isn't it?
It certainly is. We were talking before we went on air, and you were making the point in terms of how is Netanyahu going to feel when he sees this. It certainly feeds right into
whatever
he needs to justify, whatever he needs to argue. He now has the video to prove it, and there's a reason why these videos are made in different languages. There's a reason why these videos are made pointing fingers at certain countries. A lot have come out pointing fingers at Russians and warning Russian pilots, what's going to happen to them because of all the airstrikes that they're conducting. So that's a very strong message to the Russian president in terms of what he's doing in Syria.
And now now putting this in Hebrew, you know, on the same agenda. Right. Great. Yes.
Yes. So moving on, another big story that broke yesterday was Hillary Clinton's testimony before the House Committee on Benghazi. A long affair in which you know, she sat there. She was grilled by the Republicans, and you know, she was the Democrats on the committee rushed to her defense. You know, it's a debate whether this was actually on what happened in Benghazi in 2012 or political grandstanding.
What do you think? Come on, it's political grandstanding. The year is 2000 and it's 2015, almost 2016. We're heading into elections.
Right.
Yes.
Well, we have a soundbite from what Clinton said at the beginning of her hearing. Let's hear it and then take it.
I came here because I said I would. And I've done everything I know to do, as have the people with whom I worked, to try to answer your questions. I cannot do any more than that. The answers have changed not at all since I appeared 2 years ago before the House and the Senate. And I recognize that there are many currents at work in this committee, but I can only hope that the statesmanship overcomes the partisanship.
Those last lines. Yeah, well, basically, I mean, I think the highlight for me of that grilling was her actually at a certain point there saying, I can look at my notes and answer at the same time, or in other words, I can juggle, I'm a woman.
Right. No, look, the members of the House were short with her. You know, everybody was tired. It was a long debate. And at one point, you know, they said, you know, we'll give you time to sell your friends. She said, don't worry about it. Let's get on with this.
Along. No, it was, I mean, I think, you know, another showing of how these American elections are going to be fascinating, because everything is political nowadays. Sadly, all the time we have, Paula, we're going to take you off the hook when it comes to Putin's speech of yesterday, but he gave one as well. When we get back, something entirely different, yoga, meditation, no war, and only good things. Stay with us. First, the news. Welcome back. It is still Friday, October 23rd, 2015. This is still the morning edition of I-24 News. Last I checked, I'm still Yael Levi, and we're not going to speak about violence.
Woohoo!
Yes.
Awesome.
Awesome. I know, awesome is the good word.
That's a good start for the day.
Right?
Yeah.
This is the part of the show, sorry, I'm correcting my mics here, that we are not speaking about violence, but about science. For that, we have smart, intelligent women. Lital Shemesh, good morning.
Good morning.
To you.
Good morning.
And Ronnie Stav, you're going to try and convince me about yoga.
Just a little bit.
Just tiny. But we're going to start with Lital Shemesh and anything and everything you need to know in the world of science, please.
Yes, so we're starting with the first study talking about a Mediterranean diet. And actually, only when I started searching for segments for this show, I found out about the Mediterranean diet, because we live in the Middle East. We eat the food we eat. It looks
and
like
we don't even know that actually, and that's what I'm banking on, that olive oil is supposedly very, very, very good for you.
Yeah, it's very good for you. And this study shows us that, this Mediterranean diet help preserve more youthful brain.
So what is the Mediterranean diet?
Basically, it means you eat more fish, less meat, olive oil instead of butter and regular oil, lots of fruits, lots of vegetables. We here love to eat lots of salads.
Right.
It's a big part of our
I would lose the fish, and then it would be the great diet.
Really?
Yay.
No, come on.
You know, vegan.
I love the fish.
No.
Okay.
Anything that will help people eat less meat.
Yes.
So that will be good.
Yeah, more of the things that do not have what's it called with the fat thing? The that Americans love to have so much?
Trans
fat. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it also reduces the chance to get Alzheimer, which is also very, very impressive. So it highly recommend. And overall difference in brain volume between the people who use that Mediterranean diet and people who don't is equals to 5 years of aging.
5 years of aging?
Wow. Yes.
Okay.
That's a lot.
But then we die in wars. Thank you.
There's always something.
I don't know. It's not balanced. You know, we're really healthy and then we kill each other. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, and the next research talking about meditation and yoga, which will you elaborate soon?
Please,
yes, go.
And this study shows dramatically cut our need for health care services.
Meditation and yoga.
Meditation and yoga.
But what type of health service? Mental ones or physical ones? That's what I'm...
All of them all together.
All of them together. Yoga, meditation
alongside
can
with
reduce
vegan diet will make you
Yes.
feel so much better.
And the explanation is pretty simple. Stress-related illnesses won't usually kill you outright, but the damage that they accumulates over time.
Yeah.
And this study checked around 4,000 people who went to the doctors. Some of the doctors told them you need to do some relaxation activity, and some didn't. And the one who did managed to reduce their visits to the doctor by 30%.
That's what we actually need here in the Middle East. We just need everyone to do yoga.
And Roni Stav, who, I mean, for the sake of full disclosure, I'm going to bring you into this personal relationship that is me and Roni, has been trying to convince me, it's not that I don't want to do a little bit of yoga with her. I just can't find any single free minute in my life.
Which is part of the
problem. But meditation, you know, I think it's almost, when we talk specifically about meditation, it's almost a form of, it's like self-psychoanalysis in some ways, no?
Well, you're supposed to completely shut your brain. So in a way, it's not really psychoanalysis because it's not actually analyzing the moment. It's actually pushing away everything and allowing quietness.
Deny. Yes.
And also the yoga is supposed to press all kinds of different spots in your body that release whatever
that consume
releases.
all those energies and feelings. I mean, yogis do believe that there's actual like memory of moments in your body, inside your body, and only when you twist and open them, they're able to be released and find room for more.
And what else?
One day I'll get connected to my Indian roots. I need to do that.
Please do.
You should.
The next study shows us that antibiotics is linked with weight gain in children. And they basically checked around over 100,000 15-year-olds in Pennsylvania in the States that has been gotten an antibiotic treatment when they were children 7 times or more, and it shows that they gained 3 more pounds during those years.
Of receiving antibiotics.
Yes.
Well, that's a bit of a problematic study. What are we going to do with them?
Yeah, it is problematic because it's your child. You're not supposed to.
Oh yes, maybe the children
I
need
would
to
say
meditate.
don't eat meat, and then you'll have less antibiotics in your body. And then today's my day. I love this.
Yeah. What is your agenda? Yes. Okay. And what else?
Yes, so sleeping crocodiles. Let's talk about crocodiles just to sum up this segment. Still keep watch. So if you ever thought you could safely tiptoe past a sleeping crocodile, please reconsider, because this research shows us that they're sleeping with one eye open.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And those research prove that not only crocodiles but also dolphins and some kinds of birds has a part of the brain that still stays awake just to alert them whenever something.
Keep them alert and it's kind of okay. No sleep. I was just thinking that every time I pass by a sleeping crocodile, I was letting this sink.
But just think
which happens daily. Yeah.
Just think about that kind of sleep. You never really sleep. That's so sad.
It's called parenthood. That's how I sleep. Okay. No, fabulous. Crocodiles and olive oil. And it is time to move to the woman who will not touch meat. Who will never eat meat.
True.
Roni Stav.
Or dairy.
Culture contributor, the woman, the smile.
Well, today we're going to do a lot of spiral
Sorry, it's the
viral as
web
well.
review.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
deaf.
have the bow tie. It makes sense that it was
I'm
hard
going
to
to reintroduce this because I'm completely out of it. It is the spiral viral that is the web review because Ami Kaufman, our man, the bow tie, whatnot, is on is on a very, very important assignment in Oregon, visiting his grandmother.
That's
an
important assignment, definitely.
Huge.
So I don't have a bow tie, but I have some news for you guys. So the first thing is actually super exciting. Sesame Street is going to debut its first autistic character. Which is
huge.
Really huge.
Okay.
Her name is Julia. She's part of a new initiative called Sesame Street and Autism, See Amazing in All Children. Now, the initiative includes a free app that uses storybooks, video, and other visual media to assist autistic children and their families with daily tasks, because it seems like most parents to autistic children need to use all sorts of those types of visual media in order to connect to the children much more. In the storybooks, Julia explains to her friends that she plays a little different. She's saying, I might not be looking at you, but that does not mean that I'm not connected and that I'm not your friend. It's actually, I mean, it's heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. The goal is to destigmatize autism, to reduce bullying, and to show that autistic kids aren't really all that different.
Amen. Yeah.
Amen to that.
No, amen. Yes.
Definitely. Another group that suffers from bad PR is the group of insects. Now, I want to show you this beautiful art piece.
You're like a yoga aficionado, and you also like you're
well, I try not to kill them.
Okay, you try not to kill insects. You're like my husband. Okay.
What do you do with mosquitoes? That's the question.
Yeah,
I kill them.
You kill the mosquitoes.
I kill them as fast as I can.
Okay.
So this beautiful installation is actually made out of different insects. It's the work of Jennifer Angus. She's an artist and professor of apparel and textile design at the University of Wisconsin. She was inspired to do this in a trip to Thailand, where she encountered singing shawls, which is a traditional shawl with tassels that are made out of green shells of
These
beetles.
Are insects, what we're looking
yes,
at?
Can you see
Are they dead or alive?
Yeah, no, they're dead. They're dead.
Okay.
God help me. But they're all dead. And
yes,
now they became into this beautiful, I think it's just an amazing installation. There are several installations like this. The most recent one is housed in Smithsonian Rainwick Gallery. So if you're ever around, you can look at insects
it's quite interesting. Or just know that if you find an insect and kill him, you can then turn him into art.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
It doesn't end just there. Okay. Yeah, it can become a painting.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go. I hope even though we talked about insects, it didn't kill your appetite.
No,
because the next thing is going to be amazing.
Bacon?
Rainbow, no, come on. Rainbow bagels. Rainbow bagels is now a real thing. Take a look at this. I mean, this is a piece of art by itself as well. It's, of course, in Brooklyn, New York, because that's where all the fun things are happening.
And they taste like cereal.
And they taste like cereal. They taste like Fruit Loops. And they're filled with funfetti cream cheese. Maybe you're not excited about it?
No. First of all, I think it's amazing, but you lived in New York.
Yeah, no,
so
I mean...
this thing looks great, okay? It looks great. They taste like cereal. They're filled with funfetti, which means that it's super sweet. Yeah. So it's gorgeous. But after one bite, you want to, you can't.
You can only take one bite of the before you're gonna.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all you can take before a heart attack. But
actually, it's great munchies.
Yeah, true.
Okay,
true,
it's
definitely.
really good munchies,
and then you're like,
understand me. Bingo. Okay.
Wrong
And it's Brooklyn.
Idea.
It's the munchie
and it's
bagel.
in Brooklyn, so of course you'll be in munchies all the time.
Yes. Okay.
I think they definitely produced that for the Instagram pictures.
You think?
Yeah. Part of it.
I will actually bet you money that there is a line around that block in Brooklyn right now.
That's literally what it is. It's a line around the block. I mean, they ship all around the U.S., but basically there isn't enough because they just ran out of bagels. Out
of rainbow bagels.
Of rainbow bagels. That's the favorite. There are more. There's a variety. Pink Awareness Breast Cancer Bagel. Bacon, egg, and cheddar cheese bagel.
Say, what's in the Pink Awareness?
I am not sure. There was no link.
No link, okay.
But I guess it is a link bagel, and it raised awareness, as Lita was saying, in Instagram, where all people love to do campaigns because they don't need to do anything but just look really cool.
That. I took a picture of it and I posted it.
Yeah, and so that's my agenda. Yeah, there is a limited time only candy corn bagel. So if you're in the United States, please ship your bagel.
Because it's Halloween, a candy corn bagel?
Yeah. Head baker is Scott Rosilio, and he's the world's premier bagel artist. Exciting.
Yes, candy corn bagel. Wow, gorgeous.
Well,
yeah.
So there you go. This is beautiful.
You have to be truly either high or hungover to eat that. Think about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is right in the morning, so it's only after a whole night.
It's right after the rave. That's great.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, great, great.
Amen.
Yeah, Brooklyn did it again. Talking about campaign and colorful and beautiful things on your social medias to raise awareness. This is actually an amazing project by Sarah Katting. She was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, and she underwent 18 weeks of chemotherapy. Now, she explained that her nurse Lisa from the Macmillan Cancer Support, which is one of the largest British charities, have been with her throughout as she calls it, surreal roller coaster of her illness, and she wanted to do something to give something back to the cancer, to the charity. So she came up with the idea of 365-day different daily headgear. She completed it last Tuesday, having raised £15,640 for Macmillan Cancer Support. Every day, as you can see, she wore a different headpiece, and she is talking about the fact that not only that she was able to raise so much money, but it just brought a little bit of...
I am always in awe of people who are battling terminal diseases who find ways to combat this, you know,
to put a smile on their face,
smile on the face, the roller coaster that are the treatments, whatnot, and actually, you know, and put it forward. You know, they put it forward and try to also help others in their need. It's beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. She is okay now, knock on wood, if there was any wood here. And she is talking about the fact that she's taking the recovery day by day, and she's planning in even more charitable activities, including the next Brighton half marathon that she said she was only able to walk while having the chemo last year. So this is, as you said, just...
Does that happen? I mean, you know, optimistic news, folks.
Yeah,
how often does that happen here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is not going to be optimistic news.
God.
The next one. It's the most heartbreaking campaign I've ever heard about. Tashan Andrews is a 23-year-old transgender model. She worked with Nick Knight. She appeared in Dazed commissioned film celebrating the work of Jean-Paul Gaultier. But she's London-born. But looks like now they're raising a campaign to make her disown her own family. She's saying that her, quote unquote, mother called her to come and pick up some letters that she had, and when she got home, her quote unquote brother gave her the letter. She said, I want to pick up some stuff. He was smiling, saying there's nothing of you here whatsoever. And then one of her friends just did this campaign to try and create some sort of contribution for her to start her life again and move to New York City, which is the city of her dreams, and pursue her modeling career. 23 years old. Yeah.
Well, it's still awareness also to, I think, you know,
definitely raising awareness to all the problematic
and narrow-minded thinking, even within our own family units. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The American Society of Microbiology looks like they have some exciting projects coming up. They did the first ever Agar Art Contest, challenging microbiologists to mix science with art.
Okay.
As you can see, Starry Starry Night, made out of...
I love that. This was awareness for science, guys. It does.
And art. Yeah.
Nice.
Neurons.
Wow.
Yeah. So cute.
No, it's very cute. And sadly, all the time we have, folks, but do stay with us. Coming up is the best of the week that was on the morning edition. So do anything you missed, stay with us. You'll take a look now and stay with the channel for the rest of the day to pick up your news. I-24 News. This is Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back Monday.